The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so silent. 1,000 voices had been debating moments ago. Alien diplomats, war strategists, and bureaucratic delegates locked in tense negotiations over humanity's place in the galactic order. It should have been a historic moment. The finalization of Earth's integration into the wider interstellar community. Instead, something unthinkable had happened. The human ambassador had stood up, his expression unreadable, and in a voice devoid of emotion, simply stated, "Humanity withdraws." The words rang out like a gunshot, cutting through the ambient hum of alien discussions. For a moment, no one reacted. Then murmurs rippled through the assembly, turning into frantic, overlapping exclamations. It was a declaration with no precedent. No species had ever walked away from the council, not after reaching this level of negotiation. The idea itself was absurd. Integration into the council meant safety, security, access to vast resources, trade routes, and, above all, protection from external threats. To reject it was to invite disaster. Yet the humans were walking away. The ambassador gathered the paper before him, an old Earth custom, more symbolic than functional, and without another word, turned and left. The other human representatives followed, a delegation of 20 individuals, each a carefully selected specialist in politics, warfare, and trade. All stood as one and exited the chamber. The doors closed behind them with a quiet finality. The silence stretched. No one knew what to say. Then the first voice broke through. What does this mean?" The representative from the Zeltheri, a species known for its cold pragmatism, leaned forward, his facial tendrils twitching. "Is this a negotiating tactic?" "If it is, it's the boldest one I've ever seen," muttered the Hegron envoy, his four eyes narrowing. "No species has ever refused a council seat. They know what's at stake. This has to be posturing." Across the room, the chairholder of the council, a towering, multi-limbed being from the Athari Dominion, tapped his talons against the stone dais. "The humans are not known for irrational decisions," he rumbled, his voice like grinding rock. "If they are walking away, there is a reason. We must determine what it is." A murmur of agreement spread to the delegates, but there was no consensus on how to proceed. In a secured chamber deep within the council's administrative complex, key figures of the ruling species gathered in a crisis meeting. The topic was clear. The humans, more specifically, the question on everyone's mind, why? The Zeltheri representative's data stream hovered midair, scrolling through known human history. They fought tooth and nail for recognition. They resisted subjugation, rejected vassal status, and countered every economic sanction we attempted. Every step of the way, they demanded equality. Now they leave voluntarily? This is not logical. Their military is formidable, but not enough to stand alone, the Athari chairholder pointed out. If this is a show of defiance, it is a costly one. Their technology still lags behind in several sectors, a Cyrex diplomat added, his bioluminescent spots flickering with unease. Their fleet numbers are a fraction of the Vosk Armada or the Dominion's war legions. They gain far more by staying within our structure than by leaving it. And yet, came a voice in the shadows. They left. All eyes turned to the Vosk High Strategist, a creature covered in sleek, black scales. He had remained silent until now, studying the reaction of his peers with unsettling calm. "We assumed their ambition was to rise within the council. We assumed they needed us. But tell me, what if we were wrong?" The chamber fell silent again. No one wanted to say what they were all thinking. For decades, the assumption had been that humanity was desperate to cement its position among the galactic powers. And yet, if they had truly wanted that, they would not have walked away. A chilling thought began to take root. What if humanity did not see the council as a path to power, but as an obstacle? The implications were staggering. Every species that had joined the council had done so because they needed the structure, the economy, the protection. Humanity was rejecting it outright. Either they were making a fatal mistake, or they knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. The Vosk strategist leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. "We need to know what they're planning, and we need to know now." Across the galaxy, news of humanity's decision spread at an unprecedented speed. Broadcasts, encrypted reports, and intelligence briefings reached every major power. Some saw the walkout as madness, others as a calculated risk. Some whispered of internal fractures within humanity's leadership. But the most unsettling possibility, the one no one wanted to believe, was that the humans had never needed the Council at all. On Earth, the reaction was swift and decisive. Human networks went dark. Military channels encrypted themselves beyond even the Council's ability to breach. Trade deals were abruptly terminated. Stations once bustling with human diplomats and merchants were left empty. Then came the fleet movements. Human ships, once scattered along trade routes, exploration missions, and peacekeeping deployments, began consolidating. No hostile action, no declarations of war, but the silent reorganization of their forces sent a message louder than any words could. The Council scrambled. Attempts to re-establish communication were met with silence. Some envoys attempted to intercept human vessels, only to be ignored. The once welcoming species that had fought so hard for recognition had turned inward, shutting the galaxy out as if it had become irrelevant. And perhaps, to them, it had. In a war room deep within the vast Dominion's core world, the High Strategist stared at a holographic display. "They are preparing for something," he murmured. His advisors shifted uneasily. The question was what? The Galactic Council had existed for thousands of years, weathering wars, diplomatic crises, and the integration of dozens of species. Yet never before had it faced uncertainty like this. Humanity's withdrawal had sent shockwaves through the known universe. In the days that followed, panic took root in the highest levels of power. The first cracks appeared in trade. Major interstellar shipping routes had relied on human innovation, automation, logistical efficiency, and a decentralized AI-based infrastructure that no other species had managed to replicate. The moment Earth cut its ties, entire sectors found themselves in disarray. Within 48 hours, supply chains fractured. Entire fleets of cargo ships, once piloted by human operators, were suddenly absent. Commodities vanished overnight, leaving worlds scrambling to secure food, fuel, and rare materials that had once flowed seamlessly through human-controlled networks. For the first time in centuries, certain high-demand resources, like the rare superconductors used in FTL drives, became scarce. Prices surged, governments faltered, and corporations hemorrhaged wealth. The Council had assumed humanity's economic contributions were replaceable. They weren't. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings stretched long into the night cycles of dozens of homeworlds. Council intelligence agencies worked around the clock, dissecting every available detail about humanity's sudden retreat. But there was a problem. There were no leaks, no informants, no stray transmissions. Human networks remained locked down, unreadable, as if the entire species had gone silent at once. It was unnatural. They weren't just leaving the Council. They were disappearing. The authority chairholder watched his advisors argue from his elevated position at the center of the Council's command chamber. His 4 eyes scanned the reports scrolling in front of him, his talons clicking against the armrest of his seat. The humans must be forced back to the table. One diplomat insisted. This cannot be allowed to continue. Force them? Scoffed the Cyrix official. They're not a minor race. If we push too hard, this could turn into open conflict. And if we do nothing, the Zelthari ambassador snapped. Our infrastructure depends on them. The trade collapse is just the beginning. Do you not understand? If they keep withdrawing, we lose control. We cannot afford to wait and hope. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The truth hung over them like a storm. It was no longer about humanity. It was about the Council. The entire galactic order had functioned under the belief that integration was inevitable, that no species could thrive in isolation, that the Council was the only true path to stability. But now, humanity was challenging all of it. If they succeeded, if they thrived outside the Council's control, others would begin to question their allegiance. Other species, those with grievances and doubts, might start to wonder if they needed the Council at all. The possibility was unthinkable. A decision had to be made. The chairholder's voice cut through the murmuring discussions. We must act. The word sent ripples through the room. For the first time, a directive was given. Investigate, infiltrate, and if necessary, subdue. Stealth ships were dispatched within hours, slipping into human-controlled territories under the guise of diplomatic envoys, merchant convoys, and private contractors. The mission was simple: gather intelligence, determine humanity's intentions, and, if possible, re-establish control. But something was wrong. The moment the infiltrators entered human space, their signals vanished. Every attempt at communication was met with silence. Some ships returned without ever making contact. Others never returned at all. The few reports that did come back painted a disturbing picture. Humanity had not simply withdrawn. They were preparing. In the outer colonies, shipyards operated at full capacity. Massive construction projects, their purpose unknown, stretched across barren worlds. Advanced defense systems, beyond what humanity should have been capable of, were being deployed en masse. Every outpost, every military installation, every fleet movement pointed to a singular, undeniable conclusion. The humans were not isolating themselves. They were fortifying. The Vosk High Strategist stood before a star map, his cold reptilian eyes scanning the shifting patterns of human fleet formations. The Vosk Dominion had always respected humanity, not as equals, but as dangerous opponents. Unlike the other council species, the Vosk did not see the humans as reckless or naive. They saw them as predators. And predators did not run. Predators did not hide. A low growl rumbled in his throat as he pieced together the pattern. "They're not retreating," he murmured. His advisors tensed. "They're preparing for war." His words sent a chill through the room. If the humans were mobilizing on this scale, there was only one possibility. They knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't, and that made them the most dangerous species in existence. The Galactic Council was running out of options. Humanity had severed nearly all diplomatic ties. Their fleets moved in coordinated silence. Their trade networks had collapsed inward, and their colonies had transformed into heavily fortified strongholds. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. Desperate for answers, the Council convened an emergency summit. Every major power had sent their highest-ranking officials, military leaders, intelligence officers, economic strategists. The chamber, normally a place of measured diplomacy, was now a battlefield of rising tempers and barely contained fear. Their economic withdrawal has destabilized half our trade routes. The Zelthari representative snapped. Entire sectors are on the verge of collapse. We cannot sustain this. Then bring them to heel, a Vosk general growled. They rely on external resources. Blockade them. Starve them until they crawl back. And if that fails, the Cyrex ambassador interjected, his bioluminescent skin pulsing with unease. What if they don't need us as much as we assumed? The room fell silent. No one wanted to admit it, but the possibility had become impossible to ignore. Humanity wasn't reacting like a species in crisis. They weren't scrambling to secure trade deals, weren't pleading for economic aid, weren't trying to re-enter negotiations. If anything, they seemed more confident than ever. "We need a direct assessment," the Athari chairholder declared. "Enough speculation. We send an armada to their borders. Not an attack, a demonstration. Let them understand that isolation is not an option." The murmurs of uncertainty shifted into reluctant agreement. It was a show of force, a reminder of the Council's authority. A confrontation might be risky, but doing nothing was worse. The resolution was passed within the hour. The Council's largest fleet in history was mobilized. The Armada arrived at the edge of human space 3 days later. 300 warships, Athari dreadnoughts, Zelthari battlecruisers, Cyrex assault carriers, and Vosk hunter-killers form an unbreakable wall of firepower. Their orders were clear. Push forward. Do not engage unless provoked. Demand an audience with humanity's leaders. Show them that walking away was a mistake. But humanity did not respond. No transmissions, no threats, no warnings. Their fleets simply waited. The first real confrontation occurred near the Sirius system. A squadron of Council warships advanced toward a human-controlled sector, expecting resistance. Instead, they found a single human battleship stationed at the edge of the system. One ship against thousands. The Council commanders sent an open hail. This is an official diplomatic intervention. Stand down and prepare for inspection." The human vessel did not move. A second transmission was sent, then a third. No response. Finally, the Zelthari admiral in command of the operation ordered a passive scan of the ship. No weapons fired, just a simple energy sweep to assess its defenses. The moment the scan began, every single system on the Council's warship shut down. Weapons, shields, engines, even life support flickered. Panic erupted across the fleet. Officers scrambled to restore control, shouting over one another as power flickered on and off like a dying pulse. Some ships were left adrift. Others struggled to maintain stability. And through it all, the human battleship remained completely still. Then, after exactly 60 seconds, their systems came back online. The human vessel sent one transmission. For words, "Leave while you can," and then it jumped away. The Council fleet retreated within the hour. It was not a battle. There was no violence. But something far worse had happened. A message had been sent. The humans had not only disabled 300 warships in an instant, they had allowed them to recover, as if to prove a point, as if to show that this war, should it ever begin, would not be fought on equal footing. Reports of the incident spread like wildfire. Analysts scrambled to explain how the humans had developed such a capability. Some claimed it was an advanced EMP weapon. Others speculated on quantum disruptions. But the truth was clear. Humanity had surpassed them. They were no longer just another species fighting for a seat at the table. They had outgrown the table entirely. In the Council's inner sanctum, the highest-ranking officials gathered in secret. The recordings of the serious confrontation played on repeat. The four-word transmission looping over and over. "Leave while you can." The meaning was clear. The humans were not interested in negotiating. The humans were not afraid of war. The humans were warning them. For the first time in its long and storied history, the Galactic Council faced an undeniable truth. It was no longer humanity that needed the galaxy. It was the galaxy that needed humanity. The Galactic Council was paralyzed. The most powerful armada ever assembled had been rendered helpless without a single shot fired. Humanity had exposed a terrifying gap in power, one no species had even suspected existed. And now, the Council was faced with a choice. They could pretend this never happened, bury the reports, and hope humanity would simply stay in their self-imposed isolation. Or they could escalate, push forward, and risk provoking a species that had just demonstrated the ability to shut down entire fleets at will. Neither option was comforting. The Athari chairholder sat motionless in his chamber, staring at the star map projected in front of him. Human space had been marked in red just days ago, a potential war zone. Now, that color had shifted to black. Unknown, unpredictable, uncontrollable. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity's withdrawal deepened. Trade had not resumed. Diplomatic channels remained dead. Entire industries once relying on human technology continued to crumble. But that wasn't what terrified the Council. What terrified them was that humanity didn't seem to care. They weren't pleading to be let back in. They weren't offering concessions. They weren't even responding. They had simply walked away. And the galaxy was realizing, far too late, that they had taken far more than just their ships and diplomats. They had taken the future. In the war room of the vast Dominion, the high strategists watched silent footage of human fleets moving with terrifying efficiency. They were no longer the disorganized, adaptable force the galaxy had once known. They had refined themselves. The humans weren't just preparing for war. They were preparing for something worse. Something the rest of the galaxy couldn't see. The Vosk had always prided themselves on understanding the nature of conflict. War was not just about weapons. It was about knowledge. And in that moment, watching the humans move with precision beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, the high strategist understood the truth. The humans had never needed the Council. They had been studying it, testing it, measuring its strengths and weaknesses. And now, after decades of observation, they had determined it was no longer useful. For the first time in his long career, the high strategist felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, respect. The humans were not the ones who should be afraid. The galaxy was. In the depths of human space, on a station hidden from all known star maps, the true leaders of humanity stood before a colossal display of interstellar data. The Council's every move had been anticipated, every reaction, every attempt at coercion, every act of desperation. A woman in a dark uniform studied the latest intelligence feed, her expression unreadable. "They'll try again," she murmured. "They have to." Beside her, a senior strategist nodded. "Yes, but this time, they'll be more careful." A long silence stretched between them. The war had not begun, but it had already been won, because humanity had learned the one lesson no other species had. Power did not come from alliances. Power did not come from treaties or negotiations. Power came from the ability to walk away. And humanity had done just that. The galaxy belonged to them now, even if it didn't know it yet.